This video, I strongly recommend that you keep it on deck. If you can't watch the whole thing, you definitely watch it. I'm going to try to keep it short. I'll try to keep it concise because I'm going to cover a lot. I'm going to cover a lot of uncharted information. I will demonstrate evolution from an angle that's where it's rarely demonstrated. And I'm going to go into some information and I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to show you these studies. I would advise you to, I'll provide the links. I would advise you to look through them. I'm going to talk about what white science is in the sense that it's battered about in the conscious community. I'm going to talk about what Eurocentrism really is and how it gets down to a degree. I'm going to give at least one example, but connected to that example is a lot more. First, I want to say, first I'll start with that 96% human argument that's talked about. When people talk about how white people are only 96% human, this is where we need to really check ourselves because it's false on so many degrees. First, Neanderthals are, based on taxonomy, human. And this is where it comes from. It's someone came out and said that, like some scientists, probably white scientists, came out and said that non-sub-Saharan African people are 4% Neanderthal. How do you know they were even right? I fact-checked them, and I can tell you they weren't even right. But even then, if you're 4% Neanderthal, let's say I'm 4% Neanderthal, I'm mixed with the African tribes, which I'll display that have Neanderthal in them, which I probably am. I mix with whatever group of people outside of Africa that have Neanderthal in them or whatever. But even if you're 4% Neanderthal, that does not make you 96% human because Neanderthals are estimated 99.5% Homo sapien, which is just a different type of human. I'm not saying they look like human. They got strange big ass eyes, big thick skulls. They could be covered in fur. They could be musty. I don't know nothing about them, so I can't really say that. But flies are 70% human. So if you're 99.5% human, then, and you're mixed with something that's 99, put it like this. A Neanderthal would have to be some antimatter creature on the other end of the universe that has no known earthly substances that are in our DNA, because we got a lot of earthly stuff in our DNA. It would have to be like a creature made out of electrum or something like that. Actually, we might even have electrum in them, in ourselves. Maybe some radioactive material that would kill or whatever. But even if you're misrepresenting or failing to understand how DNA works, if you're quoting the whole 96%, you're acknowledging it or accepting it as a science. And if you're going to accept it as a science, then understand it's one of the main branches of sciences that support evolution. And I'm throwing that out there because a lot of people run with that Neanderthal stuff and then based on DNA, and then out of the other side of their mouth, they'll speak against evolution. So I'm just going to hurry up and get into this example, but I want to give a little bit more back to it. So I remember hearing Brother Marcus, if you don't know who he is, that's okay. He was talking to a lady, and she said to him that evolution was controlled by the government. Look, I'm no learned student of this, but there is a such thing as a conspiracy that is too grand to pull off. Evolution is supported by, off the top of my head, taxonomy. Damn, is there a helicopter up here? What the fuck? Taxonomy, genetics, anthropology, probably other sciences, I mean. But I think taxonomy covers the fossil record, so that's too many people for a conspiracy. It just is. I mean, there's too many people from different countries, different creeds that would love to, and from the very beginning where evolution became when it was in world news, really from Darwin, I think his grandfather was, and people all over the world have suspected shit. But I mean, once it was in world news, people wanted to disprove it for obvious reasons. Since this is largely about Eurocentrism, and I'll give the example when I give it, but I just want to say that I don't like using the word Eurocentrism because it becomes a pejorative, and then somebody's called Afrocentric and then Eurocentric, and it's back and forth instead of dealing with what they're really talking about. But to the extent that you could call it a noun, there is a such thing as Eurocentrism. And I ran into this when I was debating a fella that I would definitely say is very Eurocentric. I mean, very much an identitarian in the sense that I am white, I am European, which I don't get because, there's a lot of people in Europe that ain't white. It's always been true. Today, history, ancient history, all that. But I'm having a little bit of debate with him, and it's with this dude, Greenie. And Greenie isn't so much of a bigot that he wants to get into a name calling argument and all that. So I can go back and forth with him, and I'll go back and forth with people, and in hopes that even if they don't have the business, they might teach me something, or I'll have to learn something to teach them. And that's sort of what happened. Let me just step back for a second and say one thing about Neanderthals. If you've paying attention, the study of Neanderthals as it's presented in science, it has a tendency to be wrong. Like when they first released information, first they called Neanderthals, then it was Tals, then Thals again. First they were hunched over, then they were upright. Then they were everyone's ancestors before they evolved into Homo sapien. Then they were like the brother of Homo sapien. And then they didn't mix with anybody. Then they did. Then they mixed with everybody but non-sub-Saharan Africans. Now they're finding sub-Saharan African tribes that they mix with. Which makes sense. I knew that was going to be wrong. And I would hear black people online saying these who just ran with that. And white people ran with it too. Like, oh, it's the pristine white Neanderthal race, and they can do it. It's not possible. Because first of all, there was no Sahara for periods of history. The Sahara fluctuates. It beats like a heart. So how can you divide people as sub-Saharan Africans when a lot of the Africans of today that are below the desert, or depending on what kind of map you're looking at, they could be above, were where the desert exists. There were ancient rivers that don't exist, and of course you have the Nile. And like I said, white people swallowed it too. People swallowed that information. Now I'm sitting back thinking they ain't gonna test enough Africans and they're gonna find Neanderthal and Africans. And sure enough, they did, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let me go back to Greenie. I was giving Greenie some information about Neanderthals. And basically it was in Google Plus or YouTube comments. I really don't know the difference. Pretty much the same thing. And someone was asking, how did white skin evolve? And I'm like, dude, it's always been here. It's a common mutation. It's just albinism. Greenie's kind of stuck on that whole, they need vitamin D, so their skin had to get lighter so they could get more sun. And I'm like, okay, but I can demonstrate that it got lighter through the process of albinism. And I threw it at him. I was like, okay, I'm going to show you a study where Neanderthals are tested to see, like what color hair, skin, eyes they have, and they're checking albino genes. And I'm like, this is common. Whenever people want to find white people in history, they look for albino genes. So what are you saying, bro? So I'm slapping them with that. And I showed him, I'm like, and look, these Neanderthals, they didn't have those albino genes, so they were black people. He wasn't so much bothered by the albino thing. He couldn't debate that. Because when scientists are literally looking for the same genes that cause albinism, you cannot really debate that. But he did give me not really a study, but like somebody's paper. And that ends up being his rebuttal was this guy, Razib Khan's paper. Let me pull this up. I'm going to show some information from here on out. So if you're listening, whatever, in the car, you can keep doing that. But understand, I can demonstrate everything I'm talking about right here, and it's pretty easy. It did take a little bit of study to see how this test worked, but once I understood it enough, it was enough. And it is some true information, and I'm about to get to the nitty gritty in a second. So it gives me this article from this dude, Razib Khan. And he's like this Asiatic mulatto looking Indian dude. And right away I'm suspicious because the title of the article is Neanderthals Came in Different Colors. I'm like, okay, based on what? So let me kind of explain what the study actually looked at. Like I was saying, flies are like 70% human, mice are like 90 to 99, depending on how you look at it. Chimps are like 99, Neanderthals are 99.5, and all that. And I'm talking Homo sapiens, not what's considered human. If based on that, based on taxonomy, Neanderthals are human. So upright walking dude that can speak, talk, whatever language they teach it, or it knows. I don't know what they were talking about. I heard they had some like high pitched voices and stuff. But anyhow, this is what the study tests. It went through a whole bunch of it. It went through genomes from modern people, some people you might have heard of, and also it looked at the genomes for 3 Neanderthals and 1 Denisovan. Not a huge sample size, but follow me here. Now it's a plane flying over. Okay. Wait, am I Tommy Sotomayor all of a sudden or something? Okay. So, out of all like the genes that it looked at, there's several that produce albinism. And these were the ones, I'll just list them all because there's something really interesting about these genes. They looked, and this is looking at this in Neanderthals, Denisovans, modern humans. They looked at a gene called SLC45A2. This is a gene that also produces albinism in tigers. I think also pigeons. They looked at SLC24A5. It's a gene that is found to produce the black stripes and white stripes, depending on what version of it you have. If you have the albino version, it makes the white stripes in zebra fish. MC1R, which is in dogs. TYR, which is in mice, people, and cows. ASIP, which is in fish. HERC2, and these are all in people, and Neanderthals and Denisovans, and they're also in animals. HERC2, except for HERC2. It hasn't been found in animals. It produces blue eyes, but there's other blue-eyed animals. Maybe they're not even looking for it. I don't know. But out of all these 6 genes in the study, I didn't even tell you the name of the study. The study was called Predicting Homo Pigmentation Phenotype Through Genomic Data. That's exactly what it does. From Neanderthal to James Watson. That's what the study did, is it looked at different genes that affect skin pigmentation, and not just pigmentation, also the distribution. Genes that tell your hand, like if you're dark skinned, to be white and all that, like palm to be white, all those. But the ones that cause light skin in albinos or people called white, the genes for those have versions. And usually the way it works is out of those 6 genes that I named, if 4 of those genes are in their prime state, like they're unmutated, you're probably going to have dark skin. In all of those genes, the Neanderthals had the same version of those genes that I just named as Melanesians and Yoruba. Now think about what that means for a second. And I got to give props to XY Man because he was the first person to really bring this out. But I had to really look into this deep because I wanted to see just how true this is. And I looked it up, and I can show it to you right here. Is all of these genes, that cause light skin, all the way down to fish, they had the same version as either Yoruba or Melanesians. So Greeny responds with this article from Razib Khan. And I pull up the article, and it's Neanderthals came in all colors. I'm going to read some of this, because this ends up being an example of Eurocentrism, and it's hard for me to really express this because I don't know what's going on in this dude's head, but I'll elaborate. But some of this, you'd have to look at for yourself and just digest. And God damn, it's loud as hell. I should do this at night. There's a report. I'm reading from that article. There's a report in Science about a new short paper about Neanderthal pigmentation genetics. The context is this. First, in 2007, an ingenious paper was published which inferred that it may be that Neanderthals had red hair, at least based on an N equals 2 from two divergent locations. New study looks at 3 Croatian samples in the report genotypes, which are correlated with the swarthier phenotype in modern populations. Let me just stop right there. Swarthy? They had the same genes as people who probably wouldn't classify as swarthy. I mean, I'm thinking swarthy is like a Spanish pirate, who could pass as white today. Anywho, and he goes on, he says, he puts it in bold, everyone interviewed in the paper assumes that like modern Europeans, Neanderthals were a polymorphic set of population when it comes to pigmentation. There are lots of reasons for this agreement, despite issues one might take with this paper. This is, he put that in bold. Let me jump out of there. This is a nested logical fallacy right here. It says, like modern Europeans, Neanderthals were a polymorphic set. But they aren't. Here's the thing. The article didn't really demonstrate that they were a polymorphic set. So he's basically going on, everyone assumes type of assumption. Okay, so what? They assume this is what you have studies for to check it out. And it's sample size of 3, so he could have came with that. But here's the thing. Europe has black people and white people, right? So if he's talking about how Europe is really diverse, America would have been a better example. But no, when he talks about European, the hell with anybody else in Europe that isn't white. That's what he's talking about. He's not referring to Europeans. He's referring to white people. Even though Razib Khan is like an Asiatic mulatto dude, he's not white. But he's speaking to white people in their language. He's saying, you have European. But anyhow, I won't break that down too much. But the problem with that is, how can you say, to call people polymorphic is really strange, period, because it's in the eye of the beholder. It's polymorphic just means more people look different. So that's up to what you determine to be a difference. You can look at one, it's all opinion. And he's also looking at about albino genetics. And if you really want to get technical, any area that has black people has the potential to have someone with anything. Because black people can produce red hair. Black people can produce par excellent, pink-eyed, white hair albinos and everything between. So if you really want to get technical, if that's what it's based on, nobody is more polymorphic than the darkest people around, because they can produce anything. I kind of took issue with that, but let me go on a little bit further because it gets stranger. But right now it's kind of that xenophobic type stuff, but it gets stranger. The report on the paper in Science has 2 sections that I want to zoom in. First, nearly 60% of the formula's predictions match the subject's actual physical appearance, the authors say. The team considers that accuracy rate satisfactory. Given the complexity of the genetics behind skin color and other physical traits, do you think 60% is satisfactory? What curve are you grading on? I'm willing to bet that the reporter didn't consider 60% satisfactory, and neither do I. If you look at the paper, you'll see that their method predicts that Yoruba in the HGDP sample because there were Yorubas that were in the study, as I said earlier, had blue eyes and red hair. Several of the Papuans were predicted to have blue eyes. On the surface, he makes a good point right here. You know, there's somewhat of a good point, because but here's the thing: most of the errors predicted that people with darker eyes had lighter eyes, or people with darker hair had lighter hair. It predicted that two people had freckles that didn't. There was also Skip Gates, senior and junior were in there. Skip Gates, they considered to have fair skin. I mean, the brother is a little bit dark to be called fair skin, but I guess compared to a Dinka. What the hell? Why does it keep flying? I apologize. It's airplane day. I'm not even that close to airport. I thought it would be kind of quiet. The tests also predicted that a Korean and a Chinese dude would be darker than they were. But for the most part, most of the errors were related to predicting lighter hair and lighter eyes. Skin was pretty strong. It predicted skin pretty well, and I can show you the predictions. Based on these predictions, and like I said, based on the genes that I named earlier, Neanderthals and Denisovans were predicted to have dark skin, dark hair, and dark eyes, except for one was predicted to have dark skin, dark eyes with red hair and freckles. So I get where he's coming from. It's not an exact science, but again, it predicted they had the same data when it comes to skin lightness as Yoruba and Melanesians. So that's 3 Neanderthals and 1 Denisovan. So let me read again from Razib Khan. But I also think the science piece did not do justice to what we know about pigmentation genetics, which is a lot. Case in point, a particular form of the gene known as TPCN2, for example, bestows brown hair in modern humans. Any other form means hair that's another color. Since the reporter is probably not an expert, someone must have fed this information, or the reporter distorted the researcher's meaning, because this is totally misleading. There are S&Ps on this locus which correlate with brown and blonde hair, but my blonde-haired father-in-law, he's like showing out, but my blonde-haired father-in-law shares the same genotype as some of my siblings who have black hair. This effect of the variant is strongly conditional on other variants. I looked at the same SNPs they did in this paper. Okay, if you looked at them, why didn't you name them? Because I can look at TPCN2, and it's in the paper. Like, it's in the study. This one that he's saying they left out, this gene, it was tested in the study, and like the other ones, it had the same value as Yoruba and Melanesians, and like the other one, it's also found in animals, in this case, mice. So which ones are you talking about? And I think it's deceptive to just throw that out there like you're trying to debunk this article, and you're not talking about which ones. You're not being specific at this point. And you can read the rest of it. I'll provide the link. He goes on, and his examples are, again, he goes on, he talks about SLC 4582, SLC 4582, 2485, and OCA. And again, he's talking about genes and SNPs that were tested in the study and had the same values as either Yoruba and Melanesians, two dark-skinned people, and this, I'm talking about the Neanderthals and the Denisovan. So I'm looking at this article, and I gave Greeny the business again. I'm like, I broke down the article, and it took me a little while because it was so deceptive. It was just like, wait a second. All of his points were flawed to a degree. And he was just trying to say Neanderthals are different colors. That's all he was really trying to say, which, sure, there's probably a population somewhere, or was a population somewhere of albino Neanderthals or whatever. I don't know. I mean, he could have made that case. But it just came off as he was pandering to white people to flex his intellectual muscle. And you might think, well, am I jumping to this conclusion? Well, put it like this. I had this thought in my head, so I did a Google search. I just typed in his name, Razib Khan, and white supremacy. Third article, and here's where it gets kind of ironic, is a white dude calling him out. This dude, J.K. Trotter. I gotta give props to a white dude for calling out racism. I guess that means he's a Jew or a liberal. And I don't know. I guess I'll read some of it. It's not a bad read of what he calls out in his article. But understand how third article down off of Google search, and I looked at a couple other of this dude's articles, and he is kind of a soft shoe bigot in his techniques, but it would take too long for me to personally analyze this, so I'll just read some excerpts from J.K. Trotter's article where he talks about, here it comes. Khan is a science blogger, a programmer, and a doctoral candidate in genomics and genetics in the University of California, Davis. Omitted from the paper's biography, as a quick Google search indicates, is Khan's history with racist right-wing online publications. Here, for example, are 68 posts Khan wrote for Taki magazine. The site was founded in 2007 by Taki Theodorakopoulos. Ooh, that's a hell of a great name. The flamboyant racist Greek journalist known for trumping his disgust for Puerto Ricans, contempt for Africans, and suspicion of Jews. Besides, Taki publishes people like John Derbyshire, who wrote Talk Blackages in an essay so racist National Review cut its ties with him, and Vice co-founder Gavin McInnes, who penned an essay titled "I'm Not Racist, Sexist, or Homophobe, You Nigger Slut Faggot." Khan's writings elsewhere hardly reject the doctrines on which these outlets are based. He merely treats what white racists take for granted. The non-whites, especially blacks, are intellectually inferior, as an open question worth exploring in the name of scientific inquiry. Still, Khan is careful with actual words. He never says black people are less intelligent, but his willingness to treat black intelligence as a matter of debate has not hampered his career in the slightest. He's written for Slate, the Daily Telegraph, The Guardian, and how did I know that I would find something like this with a simple Google search? It's because he took an article that from a straight up point of view, if you were to look at this article straight up, they just pulled out some black Neanderthals, not swarthy Neanderthals, black as Melanesians and Yoruba. And if you're going to look at this article straight up, they're studying it based on albino genes. Why you bullshitting? So I just wanted to throw that out. And I want to say one other thing. I keep hearing misinformation about that Neanderthals didn't mix with African people. Look, African people were leaving out into the West Asia and coming back. So Neanderthal DNA is found in San, Maasai, by proxy of Maasai, Yoruba. If it's in Yoruba, it's in most African Americans. So most African Americans had Neanderthal genes. And why would you even care? Why are you bashing these people? So far, all we know of them is that they were black. But let Eurocentrism spin it, and they're multicolored. Oh, I don't even know if I want to call Neanderthals people, because I don't know how much hair they had on their body. I might see one and think, God damn, that's a mucky looking motherfucker, but I don't know. So what's the point in demonizing white people with pseudoscience? They done enough real shit to demonize them based on. What's the hell? Get enough of the blah, blah, blah. Let's talk reparations. I don't give a damn if white people got more Neanderthal than me. Let's talk reparations. This Neanderthal stuff is just a bunch of rah, rah, rah. Let's get reparations, fix our community so we can flip it and get that popping. I don't give a goddamn about. So I'm just really kind of just throwing this out there, because if we don't understand how Eurocentrism will put a spin on things, then we won't understand just how important it is that we're going to school to become scientists so we can vet these people and produce our own studies and give it straight. Because when it comes to history, when it comes to genetics, melanated people don't have to spin a goddamn thing, really. I mean, I was studying Vikings, finding out that they look like they just left Africa. You know, all of this whole myth about the blonde, redhead, pale ass Viking. You know, even though I was kind of joking when I said Vikings are black, I'm sure, even though there were black Vikings in history. So like I said, it's imperative that we get off of this nonsense and steer your kids into science, steer your baby's daddy into science, steer your baby's mama into science. Study this shit, because let these panders, I don't care if they find some mulatto Asiatic dude, they will say what they think white people want to